The early access beta testing for Diablo 4 is now over. Despite being limited in how far into the game players were able to access, there was a lot to discover within the playable characters, the new terminology within the game, mechanics that worked with your builds through skills, things that are additions because of gear, as well as an early look to the story and open world aspect. I'm going to break down everything that I could discover within the game, playing both weekends and testing out all 5 playable characters, going as in-depth as I can to hopefully help you to better understand what the game is so far, and I'm going to break down the topics of discussion with 3 categories: the ones that are good, the ones that are bad, and the things to get used to. Do keep in mind that this is all coming from a veteran Diablo 2 player whom plays Diablo 2 Resurrected, but I also have some knowledge of Diablo 3 with the playstyles and the story as a whole. Let's jump right into the video. There were 5 characters to test out within the beta, and each one was unique with their playstyles, the type of damage that they would do, and overall made it a lot of fun with the variety being brought to the game. Trying out all the classes within the open beta, this was my experience with each one. The sorcerers feel like the most powerful class out of the gate, and for those who want to try out a new character that is easy to be able to learn fast, this build would be right for you. The rogues, having also a trapsin aspect from Diablo 2, are ones that have a lot of options for dealing damage and so far seem to be a great AoE support character, while still dealing a lot of damage. Barbarians are a slow start, but with good gear, will be really powerful and fun, especially closer to endgame play. Being an up-close melee character may feel like there's a lot of risk, but they still are quite powerful and very tanky. The Necro surprisingly has strong skeletons at the start. Granted, I couldn't get him to level 25, but when it came to the bosses, we usually would take a few different waves to be able to kill. With the skeletons and bone spears, the bosses went down quite quickly. I enjoyed the shapeshifting for the druid. As for the skills that you would need to switch between the werewolf and the werebear, and vice versa, the transition between them was very smooth. Something I wish they would fix in D2R to not have to go back into human form before shapeshifting into the other forms. And being able to spec into a wind druid as well helped with crowd control, and to make the druid more fun and viable. Now with the understanding of the characters within the game so far, let's jump into the things that I found that were good within the game. First thing I want to discuss is the story and the cinematics of the game. I know many love just being able to play a game, and the story within it is not very important, as the mechanics within the game make up for the story element to them. However, I enjoy games with a good story that makes you both become immersed within it, but also gives you a reason to care for the characters and to have a sense of stakes within the decisions that you make. With this game, as we got to play it, with all the characters' physical appearance, both in how each person customizes the look, top to bottom, as well as the gear that they would have equipped, being adapted into the cinematics, it gives a real immersive feel within the story. Also, the cinematics did look quite nice. Better in some places, especially in the church scene with Lilith floating down, and in other places, still needs a little bit of a polish. But it's still early and they can always be made a little bit better. But if comparing to one of my favorite cinematics in Diablo 3, when Diablo comes to the gates of heaven to be able to fight Imperius, comparing cinematics, I'm just hoping D4 cinematics will get a little bit more of a polish overall, as Blizzard is well known for having great cinematics. And with how big this game is expected to be, I'd want this game's cinematics to become the bar of what to expect visually for games in the future. Shields actually felt like they help with defense. Let me clarify. Defense in Diablo 2 helps to be able to just not get hit. However, in Diablo 4 against the skeletons with shields, it felt like they actually were defending him, and once it was destroyed, they were vulnerable to attacks. It was a nice touch. The dungeons and side quests were really fun to try out, especially for farming and leveling aside from doing the main priority quest to push the plot forward. With having limited access to the main quests, being able to explore the vastness of where you'd be able to play made doing the side quests a lot more fun to do. Seeing the details and the graphics of the world of Sanctuary, being able to fight different types of monsters, and even fight some dungeon bosses and learning how to fight specific fight styles, gives players a variety of places to be able to grind before continuing the game, and is very fitting for how big this game is. And with the dungeons being able to be reset, can be great for those target farming and taking advantage of their build strengths to be able to level easier and faster. Additionally, the open world aspect was a really nice new addition to the Diablo franchise. Diablo 1 had some really large levels to cover while only walking around, making it feel quite big. Diablo 2 had a very linear direction to be able to progress throughout, but also provided additional areas to be able to grind, especially high-level areas that you could potentially drop every single item in the game to be able to help make builds go past being budgeted toward endgame GG builds. While only being able to run around and not use mounds yet, the vast openness of the game still felt great to be able to explore, especially with the game having to be played online. For those who favor single-player offline play, having areas so large helps to be able to feel like you're still playing by yourself, all while having the chance to party up and mostly run into players in towns. I didn't get to test this out or see it for myself, but apparently the trading of rares, what many are saying are the best items to be able to use in this game, even over legendary items, they were able to be traded amongst players, which is great for those that had questions or concerns when it came to the in-game trading for this game. There are stash tabs that you can get access to with farming gold, and at level 10, I was already roughly around 10,000 gold, so getting more stash pages can be easy to get for some players to be able to allow for more sharing of items between characters, or for people that want a holy grail and find every single item. The skill tree is improved from the initial tree that Blizzard showed us in one of the early quarterly updates. The amount of options and skills in this game is greater than that of Diablo 2 Resurrected. However, there will be specific skills for specific builds that will work best. But in early levels, being able to try out different skills with one another throughout the skill tree was fun to test out together and find the combinations that work best with different playstyles. Speaking of the skill tree, being able to respec without a token, but only costing gold, is a great addition compared to having to farm specific tokens from specific bosses to then be able to respec and try out different builds. Something that I was interested in seeing, that was talked about in early quarterly updates, is the aspect of the family element within monster types. It was great to see the mix of different monster types within certain groups, and fun to try to fight against the different types and learn to be strategic for certain ones. Having to battle the smaller ones that are quick but have a low health pool, then the much bigger, tankier, and more damage dealing ones, but are slow, then the ranged ones with mid health, but can attack from close to half of your screen away, giving you trouble before dealing with the melee monsters within the family unit. It was fun to discover the different groups and to see how they fight together and having to overcome them as a unit to get experience and hopefully get good items to drop. What did make me laugh with the Fallen Shamans when reviving the Fallens looked like in Dexter's laboratory when he was trying to find a light bulb but got mad every step of the way in getting one, just stood there shaking as though that somehow was supposed to fix his problem for him. As far as itemization, it's awesome to be able to have legendary item aspects to be able to be added to rare items, which then make the rare items more valuable than the legendary ones, as legendary items would have a max of 5 stats, with one of those stats being the legendary aspect, while rares can have 5 stats and a legendary aspect on top of that. This would mean that the majority of the value with legendary items will come from the legendary stat that would be placed into a really good rare base. This would be as close to being able to have runes and the bases to put the runes into to make Runewords as Diablo 2 Resurrected has. The next thing I want to discuss are the boss fights and having the bosses regain their health, while you get revived close to where you last were, already with all of your gear and the health potions back to being full, with the penalty being less durability for your gear. For this game, this is a cool trade-off to losing all of your gear, and the boss still having their current health when you last fought them, as sometimes doing a naked run to retrieve your corpse, especially in difficult areas to be able to make it happen, such as in Diablo 2 Resurrected with the Worldstone Keep, with the souls being able to one-shot you as you run through to be able to retrieve your corpse. This could force a save and exit for you to go ahead and try again with the boss anyways. However, I do see how this can be quite annoying, especially if you have the boss damn near dead, you die, and now you have to try all over again from square one. But again, for this game, I do see this as more of a positive than a negative. The minimap in the corner of the screen is also a nice touch. Granted, you can remove it if you'd like, but having it take up a small amount of the space away from where the field of view of the action is, as well as the indicators of where to go for specific quests, is a nice addition to help not get lost, especially with how big this game's open world is. Now, as there are good aspects of this game, there are, however, some things that are bad within the game as well, at least in my opinion. However, there aren't very many to criticize. One of the biggest issues as far as feeling like a Diablo game, items in your inventory all take up the same space in Diablo 4. Now look, I understand that they're trying to make it more simplistic for those who don't want to have to perfectly Tetris their inventory to fit everything in, and especially for those who want to sell items for gold, it makes it easier just to be able to click on the item and to keep going, whether you're wanting to pick up a sword or a ring, it'll fit in the same spot regardless. However, and again, I do understand this, but I really don't want too much of this game being primarily focused on just the new players and making things super easy for them. I do want this game to be and remain a challenge throughout playing the game, and one of the things that made it challenging in Diablo 2, as far as the risk and reward factor, is the idea of having limited space in your inventory and different items took up different spaces, so you'd have to put value on what you pick up and then continue forward from there. Damage scaling for weapons seems to be progressing in damage quickly. Even by level 10, I had items with over 100 damage. And it seems to be trying to more so pander to new players to feel strong with being given higher damage numbers early, but if you deal 100 damage and the health of the boss is between 5,000 to 10,000, that 100 damage no longer feels strong. I really wish they would have kept it how Diablo 2's weapon damage is to give players a more realistic sense of the damage that they would be able to do, to know if they need to be able to grind levels to be able to get more powerful first, without having to have all of your power come from your weapons as much as they do, but more so is inherent within the skills themselves, especially early on. This last point is simply just being a Diablo 2 player and never favoring how the new Blizzard made Diablo 3. A lot of people, even some of the well-known Diablo 2 players, have said, aside from one or two things, I don't know why so many people compare this game to Diablo 3. I don't get it. Right off the bat, you have no control over your attribute points. You'd only have control over your paragon points when you hit a specific level. You also have the way that the boss fights play out, the ground having circles appear and some form of additional damage come out aside from what the boss themselves would deal. Then there's treasure goblins, dungeons. I think you get the idea. Now there are players that are fine with this, and aside from understanding that the games are supposed to progress in design as well as the mechanics, just as Diablo 2 did from Diablo 1 and Diablo Immortal did from Diablo 3. And this may be petty to say, but I was honestly hoping for more ideas and inspirations of how this game would be coming from Diablo 2 than the very little that seems to be present. Granted, we haven't seen the full game yet, but so far, this is feeling more closer to being repurposing a lot of Diablo 3, Diablo Immortal mechanics, and aside from the depth and feel of the story, very little coming from Diablo 2 to make it connected to the franchise, and especially the most popular game of the series that really put Blizzard on the map. However, a big criticism many have about Diablo 3, the game seems like it's holding your hand most of the way through. Again, their words, not mine, as I maybe have a handful of hours playing Diablo 3 before I stop playing. So much of the power of the builds within Diablo 3 is reliant on the gear, whereas in Diablo 2, the power comes from the characters, with the gear helping to enhance the potential and not be reliant for viability. In Diablo 2, You could have a character with little to no gear and still have them be viable for farming. Hell, you could have a naked Blizzard Sorceress run the Ancient Tunnels with only magic find small charms, and she'd be able to still farm the area well. A naked Druid and naked Assassin have been taken fully through normal all the way through hell to beat the game. Another D2R content creator ended up punching the Ubers to death. No weapon, just fists, and was very budgeted with the gear that he had. And I've also had a one-item Necromancer using a teleport amulet for repositioning take on Uber Tristram and succeed. Saying all of that isn't to say that these are, or ever will be, meta. However, they show that a key aspect Diablo 2 players like is the strength and the power from the characters that they love playing come from the characters natively without heavy reliance on gear, where they can control the attribute points and the skill tree points accordingly. The last section before I summarize this video is the things to become used to, especially coming from Diablo 2 Resurrected. The first one is zone scaling with your character level. I have my own thoughts on this, but also with seeing quite a few other people discuss this topic, it's a very split topic for many. Some mentioning that with people trying to rush World Tier 1 and to get into Nightmare, that the importance of the gear is much less emphasized as everything scales with you. With this, the damage from the weapons don't scale. There's the base damage that they have, and with each levels the monsters have higher health pools, as well as they deal more damage. So the importance of the gear is still there. With scaling, it would then give players a reason to go back to areas that were initially lower, as specific zones can drop specific items, especially for crafting. You could farm them and not feel overwhelmed with them being too high of a level for your character to handle. But coming from Diablo 2 Resurrected, the idea of areas with too high of levels for your character, such as when you get into Hell difficulty, the pits in Act 1, and the Ancient Tunnels in Act 2, those are ones that players would eventually come back to, as you can enter Hell difficulty after level 40. And with those areas being level 85, many builds wouldn't last with trying to farm them at such low levels. I'm glad to see some bosses do have fixed levels and are higher than the player's level, this giving both a challenge to the player, but also if unable to defeat them, a reason to revisit the area. I'm hopeful, maybe in the endgame, we get fixed area levels to be able to have more of a challenge for certain builds, as some builds will handle certain monster types better than others. But this overall is something just to become used to for me. If I'm going to pay for a game, especially with it having a base pay and 3 different tiers for how Diablo 4 is set up, I want to not only feel like I own the game, but to actually own it, such as with having a single player offline option, and not have to rely on servers to be run to be able to play it, as I'd hate to progress so far, the servers crash, and once back up, I'm much farther back than I originally was. Hardcore players understand this feeling much more than those playing softcore, and having to restart a character is brutal, and in this case, to progress so far and then have to backtrack because of something that was completely out of my control, not a fan of the concept whatsoever. However, I know part of this is to be able to control bots and cheating, and any issues that arise, they could potentially fix on the spot to make playing the game better as soon as possible. And I know this isn't going to change, but again, something for me to get used to. I wish at least, with the collector's edition box for this game, they could have at least included an actual copy of the game, aside from just wall art for $100. Terminology needs to be better understood, as it seems that they are trying to distance themselves so far from Diablo 2 for all the new different effects that could happen, almost to the point of becoming very overwhelming. They're still slow, stun, knockback, chilled, taunted, and frozen effects. However, now there is immobilized, knocked down, feared, tethered, and dazed, amongst many others. Additionally, there's lucky hit chance, aka chance to cast, there's vulnerable enemies, healthy enemies, and some of the bosses are even labeled as terrifying.
You serious?
I'm putting this in the things to get used to, despite being very critical of it initially, and could put it in the bad section. But all we got so far is a small sampling of the game, and I want to save much harsher criticism for when the game is fully released to get the most fair judgment toward the overall game with how everything's supposed to work together. With all the different things that are dropping, such as the bone dust, the demon hearts, the souls, and all the different variants of dust and shards that I'm guessed are used for crafting, it felt like I was playing Drug Dealer Simulator.
To all units, suspicious individual spotted around cemetery, over.
He's getting away! Run, motherfucker, run!
I'm stoked that there's such an emphasis on what can be crafted, and even in making rare items more valuable by adding legendary aspects to them. It seems as though that there's so many different combinations to learn about, and it could take several months to solely focus on crafting to learn the recipes. Yes, that's a bit of an over-exaggeration, but still, there's a lot within the crafting aspect of this game that does give a sense of being overwhelming. Something else that I wanted to mention, aside from the screen that popped up to incentivize players to either buy the game or to upgrade the version that they already purchased, we haven't seen any of the monetization with the microtransactions with this game yet. I bring this up as many whom were sent Diablo Immortal to test out and review didn't initially have much criticism for the monetization of the game, but once the game came out and they played through the game again, the microtransactions were then put into place, and the reviews of the game prior to the launch sold a game that ended up being very different and seemingly misleading, and it was no fault to those doing the reviews, as many claimed that they were blindsided by this. I'm not going to say any names, but for Diablo 2 players from when the original game came out, one of the OGs of the community that many of your favorites revere as an amazing player, saying that him being misled when it came to testing and reviewing the game without the microtransactions is one of the big reasons he no longer even plays Diablo at all. Again, I bring this up simply as an important thing to consider when it comes to looking at the reviews, and if you played it yourself, knowing that there are going to be microtransactions, but unfortunately we have not seen any as of yet, and I would like to know how it's actually going to impact the game. We know this is not going to be a pay to win, but there is going to be a pay aspect, and it would be great to be able to see that prior to the game's launch. And that's going to wrap up my thoughts on the open beta testing overall, and all the different aspects of the game that I could learn about over the course of both weekends. In all honesty, I'm actually really excited for this game. I didn't want to have Diablo 4 just be a Diablo 2 clone, as we already have Diablo 2 Resurrected. With the short time that we were able to test this game out, some things did feel overwhelming to truly try to understand and to put into practice. And with the full launch of the game coming in only a few months, I'm sure it'll be much easier and better to understand then. But I'm stoked on what I was able to learn about, and excited to explore the entirety of Sanctuary and dig deeper into the story. This feels like a game that would be really fun to take your time with, to be able to get the depths of all the details within it. Just like when I originally played Diablo 2 in the first week of its launch back when I was barely in double-digit years, to go to every corner and to show what's been seen on the map. Go through every additional area that's not specific to completing quests, trying every combo of skills together to see how well they would work with one another. This feels like a game that I could spend months on with going through as much of it as possible and enjoy the journey to the end, and not just rushing through to be able to get to the endgame content. I hope you all were maybe able to learn something about Diablo 4 from this video, but if anything, just enjoyed the video and the overview of everything that I was able to uncover in the game so far. If you like this kind of content and want to see more, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell notification to be notified whenever a new video comes out.
Come on. Come on. Come on, then. There you are. There you are.
And if you enjoyed this video, please let me know by leaving a like. And if you want to watch more of my Diablo content, make sure to check the playlist in the card in the corner up above for a lot of videos that are already in the playlist and a lot more videos coming in the very near future. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.